The sam kutchen met het sprung fanus even out the goal I get reckle when if matchet.
Thank you very much. Hopefully I'll wake everybody up on this session. So thank you, firstly. So I kind of wanted to pull together, I guess, a whole series of tips really on the things that we see day to day when we work with customers on why they're not their Copilot boss. And what made me put this together, and I actually presented a similar slide deck to this at one of the AI tours, was a story I'll share with you, which I think will probably resonate with many of you if you've been involved in rolling Copilot out across your organization. But we rolled this out to our executive team initially, and senior leadership team, probably about 18 months ago now, maybe a little bit longer. And because they're all leaders, right, they're of course no one needed training, right, because they're execs, right, everyone knows kind of what they're doing. So we rolled it out, and our ops director, who I won't say anymore because you'll be able to look him up and find out who he is and insult him, but he pinged me afterwards and he said, look, Rob, I've just used Copilot in a meeting. It was great. I took no notes. I had this meeting, but I must tell you, it was awful. Like, it was a really poor experience. I don't think I can use it again. And I was like, well, okay. And I'm an MVP for Copilot, so I'm quite passionate about Copilot and its adoption. And I asked him kind of, what happened, and he said to me, look, we sat in this meeting. It was 8 hours long. I was like, okay, wow, 8 hours long. And afterwards, it gave us a summarization of the meeting, and it was just rubbish. It told us about lunch, it talked about things that we did at the weekend, and it really didn't give us any kind of element of business context at all. And he said, I was embarrassed, if I'm honest with you. And I was like, wow. So I said to him, look, what did you put in as your prompt? And he said, well, what do you mean? What did I put in as my prompt? I simply just clicked on summarize meeting, right, which is kind of what comes up after your meeting if you've recorded it and transcribed it. And I said, well, okay, wow. I said, well, did you talk about what you did at the weekend? He said, well, yeah. Did you talk about lunch? We said, well, yeah, we spent about an hour actually talking about where we were going to go for lunch. And it kind of got me to this point of going, we're still quite often in a really basic level with the way in which people are interacting with this technology. And so what I'm going to walk through today, and I'm sure some of this might resonate with you, but I'm going to walk through today a series of different things. If I can actually get my PowerPoint to advance, that's the next trick, isn't it? There we go. So what I'm actually going to walk through today is two parts to this. So the first part of this is going to be really around the real basics, right? The real basic aspect of how we should be using these tools. And then after that, I'll go through a little bit more advanced stuff with you, depending on how we are with time. So to kick off, really, anyone that is, whether you're new to Copilot, whether you've been using these tools for a long time, Microsoft very early on, set out this, how do you work with these tools, right? So they talk about this GCSE approach of writing a prompt. And I'm sure you're all experts at this stuff, but I'm going to go through this stuff anyway. So the key thing really is whenever you're prompting, doesn't matter what you're doing, is you need to be really, really clear about what you want your Copilot to do. So think of it like a personal assistant, like a PA, like a child, drunk intern, any of those kind of analogies you want to use. So really think about what it is you want Copilot to do. So whether that's summarizing a document, whether that's generating ideas, whether that's doing research, be specific about what you want. Give it context. So what you're doing, why are you doing it, why do you need it, those kind of things. How do you need the content presented? Are there any sources you need to find? So is that reasoning over meetings? Is it reasoning over content that you've given it? Do you want to give it free rein to look up information on the internet? Do you not want it to look at certain things as well? And then what's the expectation? So if you're asking it to summarize something, how do you want that summarized? Do you want it in a report? Do you want bullet points? Do you want a table? So all of those things really make a big impact to how you get a really good first response. And I'll show you some examples of this in a moment. The second point is don't be vague. So I see so many organizations where we start doing Copilot adoption. We've got quite big adoption practice here, where people think they're great at it, or they give really bad feedback around Copilot because they're not being verbose enough in what they're asking it to do. They're treating it almost like a Google search, and therefore you're not going to get good results, because a Google search kind of relates on keywords and it gives you a bunch of stuff and you kind of pick where you want to go. So really obvious stuff, I thought we'd start easy, seeing it's after lunch, but really, really important. The second part is the do's and don'ts. So when we think about what we want an agent to do or Copilot to do, then telling it what we want is great, but also telling it what you don't want it to do is also really important. So, and this might sound really silly, but things like "don't make things up" is a prompt that I use all the time because Copilot, all these AI agents want to please us, right? So the more specific we are with what we give it to do, the better. Shouldn't it know that? Yes, probably, but I find that really, really helps. We talked about examples just now, but giving examples is really useful. So if you want it to produce a document for you, a report for you, and you've already got something that you know you like, so if you've got like a weekly update that you produce yourself or used to do it manually, then give Copilot that as an example and get it to follow along, and it will absolutely do that. You can provide a Word document, a PowerPoint template, a loop file, anything you want to do. All of those things really help it deliver the context of what you actually wanted to produce. And the final point, and we'll see all these in a moment, is giving it its role. So depending on whether you're creating content that's going to be for you, as in you might want a summary of something, or you might want to produce a table of contents for a document or whatever it is you're trying to do, then that's fine. But quite often we're using these tools to create content for other people. So if you're creating something that needs to be appealing to a customer or to your internal team or your manager or your CEO, then actually tell Copilot how you want that content to be produced. You know, what role is it playing? Is it acting as a financial analyst? Is it acting as a researcher? Is it acting as just your PA? But giving it this information is really powerful. And again, you can ask Copilot to do multiple things at the same time. So you can ask it to produce a response, and again we'll see some examples of this later, that's going to appeal to the marketing team, the sales team, the finance director, the ops director as well. So that's just kind of the real starting point. Hopefully these will be seen as basics, but these are things that I see, you know, time and time again that don't work. So to give you an example of these things, then you know, here we are in Copilot. Here's a prompt, right? You know, give me some AI event ideas. Great. This is a really bad prompt. Now it's going to generate me a response. It's absolutely going to give me a response. But if you have a look at the way this is constructed, there's no real goal. I haven't really told it what I want it to do other than give me some ideas. And if we all asked everyone in the room to give me some ideas, you know, it's a bit of a free-for-all. There's no context, so I haven't given it any context about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where I'm doing it, any ideas that I might have. I've given it no sources, so I haven't given it any geolocation as to where to find this information. So have I already got a plan? Do I just want it to make some things up? You know, what do I want it to do, and how do I want that information presented? Like, do I just want it to ramble on, or do I want it to give me kind of a clear, concise output? And if we have a look at when I run this prompt, and I apologize, these are pre-staged just because sometimes it can take a while for these prompts to run. This is a pretty poor output. Now, you know, you'll see here at the top, it has recognized my role. So I'm the CTO here at Sicilian, the company I work for. So it has pulled this from Entry ID. So it's tried to put a little bit of context around what I might want based on who I am. But this is really pretty generic and not particularly useful. None of this is stuff that I would particularly have in mind if I was going to create an event. If we have a look at a slightly better prompt, then this is better, right? It's not perfect actually, but it's better because I've told it what I want to do. So I'm talking about maybe doing a promptathon. I've given it some context, so it's about driving awareness and driving skills around the use of AI. I've given it a bit more context around what I want to do. So I want to raise some money. So I want to use it as a charity. So I do a little bit of work for a conservation charity on the Isle of Wight. Ask me about that in the chat. And I've given it some sources, some locations that I might want to do these things in. And I've given it an output, what I want it to do. Now, the way to very quickly tell whether you've got a good prompt, I find, is if you have a look at how this prompt runs, you can see on the right-hand side here some context that it's giving me back, right? So you can see it's reasoning over my content, it's doing some research, it's looking up locations, it's doing some searching, and it's running through this output. So when we think about those GCSE outputs, this kind of ticks most of those boxes. And if we have a look at the output that it's generated, then this is much more aligned to what I would expect, because I've told it what I expect, therefore it's delivered kind of what I expect, if that makes sense. So it's looked at some specific locations that I've given it. It's found locations, it's worked out where they are, it's looked at, the community venues, it's looked at whether they might provide it for free. So do some of these things come out for free? So again, just a really simple example, but some of these tips I find make the world of difference, particularly if you're trying to deploy this within your organization, or if you're just trying to get a better experience. And of course, most of these things apply whether you're using Copilot or any of the other products that we of course don't want to talk about out there. So that was kind of my first set of tips really at the top. So quite basic, just to kick us off for coming back from lunch. The next bits I'm going to talk about are some of the other areas that really make huge value to the way in which you work. So we're going to touch a little bit on how you can customize your Copilot experience, how to keep the conversation flowing. So this is really about how you evolve from your first prompt into future prompts. We'll talk a little bit about scheduling prompts, why you might want to do that. I mean, I'll touch very briefly on agents. And I appreciate that there's other sessions within this community event that will touch on agents, but I think it's worth just touching on some of the things that you can do and when and why you want to do that. And then we'll move into part 2, which has got a few more advanced things. So bear with me. So if you're using Microsoft 365 Copilot, you'll see at the bottom, if you kind of click on your user icon at the bottom of the Copilot screen and go to settings, then you'll see there's a whole personalization setting that you can go to. So you can control things like the quick view and whether you pin it to the taskbar and those kind of things. But the really interesting one is personalization. And when you click on personalization, you'll see there's a chunk of things that light up. Some of these aren't configurable, and some of these are. So if you've got a Microsoft 365 Copilot account, then work profile will be lit up automatically because it's going to pull certain information in from your Entra ID. So things like your job title, who you work for, the organizational structure, those kind of things. And that, of course, helps Copilot to understand things like, give me recent emails from my manager. Well, obviously it will know that because it will pull that information from Entra. So some of those things are captured. You can view it and see where the information is coming from, but I'm not going to touch too much on those things today. The key ones to touch on really are instructions and memory, of which are both quite similar. So if you click on the save memories, manage save memories, then what this will give you the ability to do, and you can remove these as well, is to see all the things that Copilot has remembered about you and your preferences. So memory really is this ability to customize Copilot on the fly. So it gives you this kind of state of essence of how you want to work. And building of memories happens automatically, or you can force it to happen by, essentially creating a prompt that says, remember. So as an example, if I use this prompt and said to it, look, whenever I ask you to do a task that requires finding out information, always review your response and check reference and sources. So again, this is an instruction I'm giving it. And what happens when Copilot receives an instruction that it believes is a request, you'll see it will flash up with this little memory updated box underneath, which is quite useful, and it will kind of tell you that its memory's been updated, and you'll be able to track those memory items on the right hand side. So you'll see here, just in this demo example, I've told it that I want to use Apple style marketing responses. I don't want it to use M dashes. I want it to use UK English, because Copilot does typically default to the US language, so that's quite useful for me. The next one we have is custom instructions. So instructions work in a very similar way, but rather than building up over time, these are things that you can deliberately set. So these apply across all of your Copilot experiences, with the exception of agents, which I'll touch on later. So what you can do here is really think about, how do you always want Copilot to respond? So you can in here input things like, what's your preferred writing style? How formal or informal do you want its responses to be? How detailed do you want the explanation? So you can obviously play around with these, you can change them, you can tweak them, you can delete them. But it's worth just giving a bit of thought around this. If you find that you're not really getting the best experience out of Copilot, just kind of tweak it. Okay, so you've got memory, which kind of happens on the fly. or because you tell it to remember something, and instructions which you kind of set up front as a default action. But these all make a big difference to how you work. And you'll see this on the next page. But if you then ask Copilot to do something, so create me a marketing pitch, for example, then you'll see where this memory is inflected, because it's pulled up here in this example. Here are 3 Apple style pitches written in UK English, no M dash, right? And it's quite obvious to tell that it's pulled those things from memory. Hopefully all good. Next thing is the conversational piece, right? So in one of the previous examples, we talked about creating this AI event on the Isle of Wight. So we went through a couple of iterations of the prompt, and what I've now done is, staying in the same conversation, I'm now asking Copilot to create me 3 pitches to basically promote and advertise the event. And one of the things we touched on was about who are you creating content for. Well, then here I'm saying that actually create me 3, one aimed at business owners, one aimed at sole traders, and one aimed at venues that I want to hire, hopefully for free. And again, this is what Copilot has come back with. So again, it said, yes, I've done this for you. I've used Apple style marketing because that's what I asked it to do in the example. And it's given me 3 examples. I've just shown a couple of them on here, but you can see how it's created this content because I've given it specific guidance on how I always want these things to be done. So, and you can keep going in a conversation as long as you're on the same topic. And one of the other things that I would say is really important is make sure you do start a new conversation if you're going down a different track, because I see this again quite a lot where you could be in a deep conversation around this. You could then say, actually, could you summarize my meetings over the next couple of days? And it's quite easy for Copilot to get confused, because it might say, well, hold on, you've been talking to me for the last hour about running this event. So it kind of tries to bring some of that essence into any future meetings that you're having as well. So important point, if you start a new conversation, that's the best way to start clean with Copilot. Other thing to bear in mind that I find really useful, more so for doing, if you're doing email summaries and those kind of things. So I've just come back from annual leave, and one of the prompts that I ran on my way back actually was, can you summarize any missed emails I've got over the last few days, particularly ones from my manager that require a response, etc., etc. Any prompt that you write within Copilot, wherever you kind of get to, you'll find you have this. If you click on the little 3 dots at the bottom underneath the prompt, you can schedule a prompt, and you can schedule any prompt that you write. I think you're allowed to schedule up to 15 prompts currently. I believe that's correct. And what you can do with any prompt is say schedule, and then I've just using the example I gave here. So this is not really typically a prompt that I would want to schedule, but I can decide when I want this prompt to run. So I can run a prompt, daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, if I want to, and I can ask it to, to generate that for me. And Copilot will run those in the background as a task, and it'll pop up and tell me, you get a notification on your mobile phone or on your desktop app that tells you it's done that. But it's really useful for things like weekly things that you want to do. One of the things I use this for is tech research. So I run a tech research report every week. I've got quite a long prompt that I use for this, and I just schedule it to run monthly for me, so I get all the latest tech trends of things that are happening across Microsoft and Cisco and various other things. So again, a useful thing to play around with, saves you a whole bunch of time. So we've covered the first 7. Appreciate it pretty quickly. I will share all these with you. The next one is creating agents. So one of the things that we can do with prompting is your prompts can get quite big, particularly if you're trying to get it to do some quite complex tasks, and you get sort of typically about 8,000 characters now when you create a prompt. You get a huge window in which to ask things, but it can be quite hard to keep track of those things, and of course you can save prompts and copy and paste them and those kind of things. But one of the things that you can do within Microsoft 365 Copilot is create your own agents. So this is a very quick walkthrough. I will share all of these. There are step-by-step instructions that I built for these, and there are some links at the back that actually give you some walkthroughs that Microsoft have created that you'll find really useful. But essentially, if you go into the main Copilot page, then you'll see under agents, and there's a couple there that I've already built. Then you'll see this kind of create agent box, and you can click on that, and it takes you to what Microsoft have now called Agent Builder. It used to be called Copilot Studio Lite. We know how Microsoft love a rebrand. So you can click on create agent, and you can essentially create your own agent. You can create an agent from one that's already been created, or you can create from scratch. You can describe how you want an agent, and Copilot will essentially write the instructions for you to build an agent. I tend to find I get better experience if I describe what I want, because that's kind of why I'm creating an agent. So think of an agent as really as a predefined scripted prompt with its own set of instructions and content, if you like. So one of the things that I do, or my team do a lot, is write statements of work. So we do lots of technical deployments, we do adoption, we do network installs and Teams deployments and all these kind of things. So we built an agent for creating a statement of work. So when I go to create an agent, what we see here is configure. And I've given Copilot a really strong set of instructions, and I've used pretty much 8,000 characters. I've pretty much filled up the box, and I'll let this kind of just scroll through, so you can kind of see the level of detail. I don't expect you to read it, but what you'll see here is the level of depth that I've gone into. So I've given this a real multiple step of instructions of how I need it to go and create a statement of work, what it's going to ask the user for in its response, how it's going to pull the information together, how it's going to create the end document. And so when this agent runs, it will essentially run through all of these steps as it goes through a whole set of skills that I've essentially giving it. I've given it audience and tone, I've given it constraints, I've also given it some content, so I don't want it to search the web, but I have given it some uploaded files. So I've given it a resource cost, so this is kind of how we calculate our costs, and I've also given it a template. So I've given it a templated document of what a good statement of work looks like, so it can use that as a reference. We go back to that point of giving examples of how these prompts are going to work. And I've then also given it these suggested prompts. So you'll notice if you go into Copilot a lot, you'll see these kind of suggested prompts, and this is exactly what I've given it. So when I give this to a member of my team or in any other part of the business, then they can see how this runs. And so when I save that agent and I compile it, this is what we see. So in this example, I'm going to put create a statement of work, but this is almost like demo mode, as I've called it. So I'm asking it to create this on its own. I'm not going to run all the way through this because this does take a few minutes to run, and I'm kind of conscious of everybody's time. But you'll see as this runs through, it's following the instructions. So it's going to create me a statement of work. And what I've asked it to do in this example is fill the answers in so I don't have to. And this is a really good way of actually testing your agents out, right? Because I've just asked it to make some stuff up. So it's running through this now, and it's creating me a statement of work using the template that I've given it as a style, and following through those multi-step instructions all the way through. And again, I could have done this with a long prompt, but it's far easier to create this as an agent because I can then keep it up to date, and I know it's going to do a particular task, so I get a bit of version control with it, and I can run it. And once it's created, I can simply share this with other people, and it will pop up in their team site and in their Copilot app, and they can use it. So, and these are really, really simple to make. I mean, they are. It does take a little bit of perfecting, of course, but it's something I find really, really useful to walk through. So more on that in the notes that I'll share with you afterwards, and you can see we can kind of keep going. Okay, so mindful going through this stuff quite quickly. Part two. So part two, I'm going to go into a couple of other areas. So we're going to look at some of the built-in agents. We're going to talk a little bit about Copilot notebooks, and we'll talk about some of the frontier things that are coming into Copilot as well, that hopefully will help you. So Microsoft have got a whole set of built-in agents that you can use that are all designed, think about the point I made before, that are designed to do specific tasks. So think about Copilot chat as almost that default place to go to generate information, to ask things. And an agent's job is to do a specific task. So in the previous example, I built a statement of work agent because I wanted that to be something that is specifically targeted around creating statements of work, and I've given it those detailed instructions. Microsoft have done the same with a lot of the agents that they have built, and there are lots of other agents from third parties, depending on whether these things are enabled in your business or not, that you can also lean on. So to get to these, again, you head over to your Microsoft 365 Copilot app or the browser and click on all agents. And what you'll see is a whole list of agents that are available. So your agents from Microsoft, you can search the store. There are thousands of them out there, depending on whether you've already built them in your organization or whether they're available to you through other partners. There's a couple on here that I'd really recommend if you're not familiar with, that you do have a play around with. Researcher is one of my absolute favorite agents of all time. It's extremely powerful. I'll touch about that in a minute. The analyst agent, and if any of you are into doing finance and things like that, then the analyst agents are really good. Our sales managers use this a lot to analyze sales data. They get exports from our really clunky old CRM system, and they play this through analysts to have a look at kind of trends and things over time. Our finance team use this to look at prices of hardware and availability and these kind of things. So I'm going to touch on a couple of these today. One of them is the prompt coach, which is one that's kind of quite overlooked, and we've been talking about prompting a lot, obviously, during the session today. But again, this is a really good way just to ensure that we get the very best out of how we prompt, and it's good as a teaching aid. It's also good just to kind of have a look and see what works. So this is a prompt, an agent that Microsoft have written, obviously follows their GCSE mindset methodology. But what I've done here is just saying to Copilot, I'm not getting what I want out of my prompt. And I've given it the prompt that I said was quite good earlier on. So this is the prompt that I wrote that gave me the result I actually wanted. And if we run this to see what this will actually do, then what we should find is that this will now analyze my prompt, and it will give me feedback on my prompt and write me a better version of the prompt that then should yield a better result. So again, I'll run this through just quickly, and it's going to go through and have a look at my prompt and tell me what's good. So it has told me it's got a goal, it's got geographical context, great, but it's actually told me there's some stuff that's quite weak. So again, I haven't given it a role, which I didn't, absolutely correct. I didn't give it a format. I didn't tell it how I wanted the output. So it's come back and said, look, this is how you could perfect the prompt that you've given me to get a better output. And it's given me that methodology breakdown, and then what it's going to do underneath is now give me the prompt, and you'll see here it's following that GCSE approach in the way that it's describing for me. So again, this is really good, and if I put this prompt in, then I'm going to get hopefully get a better response. So it's good. I think once you get the hang of this, then it's probably an agent that will become less necessary, but I do think it's a really, really, really useful one to help people feel more confident in writing prompts, because there is a little bit of a science to it. There we go. Touched on prompt gallery earlier on. So this is something that Microsoft had for a while. It's quite hidden away, and I wanted just to bring it to the surface for you all as well. So Microsoft spent quite a lot of time helping people to prompt, right, to get better prompts, because this is kind of how things work. So again, if you go into any new chat within Copilot, this is my corporate account, so you'll see a few names of people in here. But what you'll do here is when you start, you'll see these starter prompts that kind of pop up. And again, it's context aware, so it knows who my direct reports are, it knows people I collaborate with, it knows what meetings I've got coming up. So it's given me some quite useful suggested prompts. But if I scroll down the page a little bit, then what you'll see when I start a prompt here is we get this whole list of kind of things that we can do. We can see a shorter version, we can see a longer version. But when we click on prompt gallery, we get this really useful page, which is giving us this whole list of different types of tasks that we want to carry out, you know, what role we're in, what department we're in, what agent we want to use. And this will give me some starter prompts. Again, help me get good context out of these things. And this is just quite good from an idea perspective to understand what I might need to do. So again, just one to be aware of, it's really useful to pick up. And again, if you save any prompts, then these will be saved here in the prompt gallery. Researcher, touched on earlier, and this has had a massive update. And again, there may be sessions today that cover some of these things. Researcher is a dedicated research agent that is phenomenal at carrying out really deep university level research for you on any topic that you want it to do. It is built on dedicated deep research agents, originally from OpenAI, now also from Claude. And one of the things that Microsoft have done recently, and I think you'll need to be enrolled in the Frontier program, which is the early demo version, if you like, of Copilot, early access program, is Microsoft now have introduced two different modes. So they've got what they call critique, which is this default mode, and counsel. And in brief, the way they now work is researcher will go and carry out a whole bunch of research for you. And I've got a short demo I'm going to run here as well. So we'll run a quick demo just to do some research around, you know, what's causing the price of fuel to go up so much. Right? This has obviously been quite controversial, but you know, we have this mode of critique where the way that Copilot researcher will now work is it will go and do some research for you using OpenAI, and then Claude, which is the Anthropic engine that Microsoft now use as well, will critique its work, feed back to the first agent, and then get it to refine its output. So you've kind of got an agent doing research and another agent reviewing that research, which is quite an interesting approach. I'll let this kind of run while I'm talking. You've also got this other mode, which is called Model Counsel, where the researcher agent will actually use the OpenAI engine and also use the Claude engine, and the research will get done by both agents at the same time. Claude's a little bit faster than OpenAI. And then at the end, a third model will review the two bits of research that have been done, and it will give you an analysis of, you know, where the models agreed, where they didn't agree, things they agreed on, what agent gave a better deep analysis. So it kind of gives you this ability to determine like what's the best way of pulling this information together. So research is really good. I mean, some of these researcher prompts can take 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes to run. They're really, really extensive. If you haven't played around with researcher, I'd strongly recommend it if any of you are doing any form of kind of research or pulling together information from multiple documents. So one of the things that we use this for, we've just got a new MD and he's been using this actually to have a look at lots of trend data. You know, so loads of data that the finance team have given him. He's actually using researcher and analyst to pull some of this information together to give him insights, because to go through this level of information manually just takes days and weeks and months even. So you can see here this output's generated for me, generated by GPT, refined by Claude, because Claude has done an analysis of this. And if I just let this run through, we'll move over in a second to the other method of usage. In fact, we'll scrap that. We'll move on. I'm just kind of conscious of time, so we'll move forward, and I'll leave you with this to watch a little bit later on. Another one to touch on, which again I think is a really powerful thing, and often, you know, forgotten about. No one knows about it, so I wanted to bring it to the surface. Is meeting recaps in Teams. So if you use Teams for your meetings and you record the meetings, and you have a Copilot license, then you'll probably be familiar with these intelligent recaps, or meeting recaps as Microsoft calls it, where you can go back into the meeting, you can obviously watch the recording, you can see when key people spoke, and Copilot will give you an AI generated summary and notes around that meeting, which is great, and they're really, really powerful. But one of the things that you can do, and again, I find lots of people don't know about this is you can create custom summaries now as well. It's a relatively new feature, been out a couple of months. But if you click on custom summary, then what you can do for your specific meeting types is you can create some essentially instructions again around how you want that recap to be. So I have a meeting every Monday with all of my direct reports, and I then have a meeting on a Tuesday morning where I present what's happened this week or last week to the rest of our leadership team. So what I do is I take this hour and a half meeting transcript, and I have, and this is a real prompt, I use this every single Tuesday morning, and I ask Copilot on the back of that meeting, I want my meeting recap to be structured like this. So I ask it to pull the recap together that's in a way that's going to appeal to different people in the business that I'm working with. So it understands that. So I'm just giving me the output of the meeting. It kind of puts it into a structure and then gives me 3 key takeaways. Now, obviously, I do need to review that and make it my own, but I find that's a really, really useful way of taking particularly a long meeting or a meeting that I may have missed as well. Then these custom recaps I find are really, really important and really useful. And again, it's a tool that you've got, so to kind of use it. Next thing to touch on is Copilot notebooks. So if you've not seen notebooks, again, it's part of your Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription. You'll see notebooks in the drop down. Then notebooks are very similar to Notebook LM, if you've seen that, one of the Google products. Notebooks is kind of halfway between prompting and an agent, but it's kind of like almost a self-contained entity. So think of a notebook as, multiple pages of content. So that could be an output from a Copilot prompt that you can turn into a page. So a notebook can have pages. I've got some walkthrough guides on this that I've linked to at the end. But a notebook can contain multiple different bits of content. Okay, so again, some of these is a frontier, so preview alignment, but you can drop multiple pages, you can drop SharePoint sites, you can drop individual bits of content in that. And then anything that you do within Copilot on the right-hand side, you have your kind of Copilot pane, will reason over the context of that notebook. So notebook contains pages, can also contain links and resources and other things. And then what Copilot can do is create things for you on the back of that. So you can create audio overview, so think podcast, where it can create that in a 2-person, like a news bulletin type approach, or it can create you in a more traditional podcast, like storyboard. It can create you study guides, it can pull documents out of these things, all the things you'd expect it to be able to do. And mind maps, which are actually really great, which I'll show you in a minute. So Copilot notebooks, again, can have instructions. So you can have all the content that you put within your notebook. This is one we've got around some of our Azure services that we provide. And again, I've given Copilot notebooks instructions. So whenever I use this notebook, this is what it needs to know. So again, it's an expert. So I'm giving it a role about what it is. I've told it how I want it to respond. I've told it not to make things up, and to only use the context that's inside this notebook. Again, use English. So yeah, you can see the instructions there. The final bit I think I touched on was this use of mind maps, which again I find really useful if you go back to a notebook you haven't used for a while, or if somebody shares a notebook with you and you're like, what's in this? Is this ability to go and create a mind map. And a mind map essentially just pulls out all the key context of the things that you've talked about or the things that are contained within your notebook, and provides you this kind of like structured layer of the content that's within it. So think of it like almost like a table of contents, if you like, but that reasons over all the different aspects of content within your Copilot notebook. That's it. I was going to touch a little bit on co-work, but I think we're probably out of time for that. I have got some videos and stuff on my YouTube sites and things which I can share with you. So firstly, thank you for listening to me ramble on. I hope that wasn't too quick. I know I covered quite a lot of content on there. a couple of URLs that you can just grab from the QR codes on here, and I will share them afterwards into the chat. I've got a blog site where I talk about a lot of this stuff. A lot of this is focused on Copilot adoption and technology. I've got some walkthrough guides of Copilot notebooks, of using Teams in Copilot, using CoWork. The agent templates are Microsoft's agent templates. These are really, really good if you want to have a experiment of building your own agent. So walkthrough guides, sample instructions, sample files, really, really useful. YouTube videos. So again, I've got a handful of YouTube videos on some of this stuff that we've walked through today that you can have a look at. And the prompt gallery on the right hand side is Microsoft's prompt gallery. It just takes you to a quick link. If you snap this on your phone, it will just take you straight through to that site. So thank you so much. Hope you found it useful. We'll flip over to the questions and see if there are any.
Thank you, Rob. You're perfectly in time. Very, very cool. I think that there were a lot of information, a very, very nice rundown with some really well prepared demonstrations and ideas. I think we had non-directed question in the Q&A, but we had some comments in the chat.
Oh yeah, let's have a quick look through those.
So there was one question around the description of the agent. For a shared agent, a description would be helpful, but it's not displayed. I mean, that's like an ongoing thing that I'm seeing. The agent description is sometimes used in different ways, right? So sometimes the description of the agent is displayed when you open the agent in an app store.
Yes.
But sometimes the description at the same time is not for an end user, but it's for other agents. So that is also something that we see. So it's not always clear, I think, how to set up the description right, and if it will be used from a user, from a real person, or from another agent.
Yeah, that again, I'd encourage anyone that when you experience this to file feedback. You know, I think like everything with these tools, they are constantly evolving. I mean, I went in this morning, and the user interface has just had a refresh as well. So some of the screenshots I put in, which I only did yesterday, have already changed. Right, so you know, Microsoft are inherently bad at renaming things. And changing the look and feel, generally by user feedback, but they're not very good at telling us about those things. So particularly if you're enrolled in the Frontier programs, which I think anyone can now enroll in, but if you are on these early previews, expect it to change. I mean, don't go on holiday. You know, I went away and came back and everything had changed. So they do, but do file feedback, because they do get involved. I'm sure some of you, if you're involved with Microsoft on some of the technology preview programs and stuff, they really take the feedback seriously. So do file that feedback. I think, you know, some of these community conferences, for example, are a great way to share some of these things. I've got this big frustration as well with agents not displaying what they're for and the purpose. They tend to do it if you build it in Copilot Studio, but don't do it if you do it in the agent builder. I know that's a known bug, and it was talked about. I was over in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and it was one of the things that they have said they are fixing this month. So I'll hold my breath on that one, but it is quite frustrating. What else have we got in the chat? Mainly that, yeah. Mainly that, I think.
Yeah. So one question that comes up to my mind always when I'm you know, in situations like that where I'm stepping outside my role, and I'm not the one talking and presenting and thinking, I'm more like listening to someone like you. You know, I think it's incredibly overwhelming what we get in terms of features, what we get in terms of technology. We have, like, you know, in every tool we have different options. We have, of course, always our prompts that rule how the tools work. Then we have settings. Then now we have co-work with different skills. Then we have agents that can have agents. And we have agents who can have features. And the agents have Python. And we have notebooks that have all these funky buttons and so on. How would you advise, to be honest, in this world of ever fastly changing and improving technology landscape, how would you deal from an end user perspective? Because even we, as someone who are sitting right on top of Microsoft, have problems being up to date, keeping with all the features and so on. How would advise someone to stay there, to focus, to concentrate?
Yeah, I think any organization that is using these tools for business will benefit from having an internal community. There is so much that goes on all the time. I think there is so much training content available. I mean, almost too much. And you're right, there are confusions over, firstly, whether you've got what they now call Copilot Basic, which is the version of Copilot that you get within your Microsoft 365 subscription, which doesn't have access to work data and all these other things. The license obviously impacts what you get. So whether you get what they call work IQ and some of the agent capability and those things, some of it is limited by region. So there's also region restrictions on things, particularly if you're using some of the advanced tools that use some of the Anthropic technologies. So co-work is an example of one that uses that. So I think in the EU and the UK, you have to enable it explicitly as an admin thing. Outside of the EU, it's enabled by default. So there's a few differences between different regions, but I think it's it's a good idea to have some champions, which don't need to be and shouldn't be technical. They really should be user champions. I think conferences like this are fantastic. I think just bringing people together, there'll be local community user groups in your area, whatever country you live in as well. I think find those, join some of those. And I think just share the love. I mean, it is tough to keep up to date with something that is evolving at such a pace. I think what we'll see, and this is just my viewpoint of what we'll see as the technology comes together, what I'd like to see is everything starting with just your Copilot prompt, right? And ideally Copilot being smart enough to understand when there's an agent that can do that for you, or whether it needs to go and leverage, the deep research agent or co-work or one of those things. And I would see Copilot as being that entry point. Today it's not. There's multiple entry points, and there's also a slightly inconsistent experience between where you access Copilot from, what the mobile experience is like and the desktop experience, etc. So I think it can be, even for people that work in it every day, Daniel, as you say, confusing, but I do think it will converge, and I think it's only going to get better. And the only way it will get better is if we do provide feedback to Microsoft. I know there's lots of people doing that, but it's also a really easy thing to think, well, everyone else will give feedback, so I don't need to. But I would really encourage everyone. I've seen some of it just through, I'm an MVP for Copilot, and sitting with the product team a couple of weeks ago in Seattle, they were, they literally go through and bubble up the most common bits of feedback. So they do listen. Whether they act is another question, but they do definitely listen and they do definitely see it. So do feedback.
Thank you for the extensive answer. Very, very cool. Okay, folks, do we have any more questions to Rob right here? Last chance.
All good. Well, look, thank you everyone for listening to me ramble on. Hope it's funny.